All right, boys and girls, welcome to chapter 5 of Who Were the Brothers Grimm. It's called Collecting Fairy Tales. One day, Arnhem sent Jacob and William 2 fairy tales. A storyteller had told these stories by heart from memory. The juniper tree was the story of an evil stepmother who kills her stepson. The fisherman and his wife was the story of a poor fisherman and his greedy wife who is never satisfied with the gifts they receive from a magical fish. Up until this point, Jacob and William had been trying to find fairy tales in books. Now they had 2 authentic German fairy tales directly from a storyteller. Jacob and William decided to look for other storytellers and write down their tales exactly as they told them. Before people used writing to record information, they handed down their history, beliefs, and way of life by telling stories. Fairy tales were important. Not only did they provide entertainment, but they also taught children about growing up. Fairy tales were about facing challenges and overcoming them. No matter how big a giant might be or how scary a dragon is, the hero is always able to defeat it. As more people learned to read and write, fewer and fewer cultures told stories from memory. The Grimms were educated young men who were trained to find information in books. Unfortunately, no one had thought fairy tales were important enough to write them down. The brothers now realized that they needed to go to the source, the storytellers. Cinderella had been told for hundreds of years in many European countries, even before French author Charles Perrault wrote down his version. In each country, the story had a different title and the characters had different names. It was Perrault who added the pumpkin carriage, the fairy godmother, and Cinderella's glass slipper to the story. In the German version that the Grimms found, Cinderella does not have a fairy godmother, but receives help from a wishing tree that grows on her mother's grave. The Grimms thought Perrault had done a good job, but they wanted a collection of German tales. They didn't have to go far to find storytellers. Local women seemed to be the best sources for stories. The Grimm's next-door neighbor, Her Wilde, had 4 daughters who all loved folk tales. The Wildes passed along many of their stories to their brothers. Even the Wildes' nanny and housekeeper, Marie Mueller or Old Marie, contributed several stories. One of them was the German version of Little Red Riding Hood called Little Red Cap. Another pair of sisters, Amelia, and Jeanette Hasenflug, knew a dozen stories, including several of the most famous, Brer Rose, Tom Thumb, and Snow White. Soldiers, farmers, and fishermen also told tales to the brothers. A retired soldier told Jacob several stories in exchange for a pair of pants. The soldier later told Jacob that he thought of him twice a day, whenever he was putting on and taking off his pants. For 6 years, the Grimms worked on the fairy tales. It took time to collect the stories and then organize them and edit them. In 1812, Arnhem visited the Grimms. When he heard their manuscript, he immediately set off to Berlin to find a publisher. George Andres Reimer agreed to make the Grimms' 86 stories into a book. Just 5 days before Christmas, Children's and Household Tales by the Brothers Grimm was published. That concludes chapter 5. Chapter 6 will be tomorrow.